I bet you've been asked this question a million times. Matter of fact, I think I've heard you answer on it, but I'm going to ask it like this: If Vern put the belt on Hulk Hogan, the AWA World Heavyweight Championship, do you think uh,
That
the
would have made it.
well, do you think it would have sustained the AWA longer? And do you think the territories might not have dissolved the way that they did?
They wouldn't have dissolved the way they did. Hogan was that figure, but in the AWA, he wasn't ready to carry the belt yet. I watched him up in New York wrestle. I was on the card up there, and he had a horrible match. And the guy, he said, I don't think I can make it in professional wrestling. And I said, well, why don't you come to the AWA and we'll teach you. And I told my dad, I went back. In fact, I wrestled in the Garden that night against a guy named Johnny Rods. And we were on the second match, and the place was sold out. And I went in, and we had about a 14-minute match, and we had the people standing. And when I walked out, Vince McMahon Sr., he stopped me. He said, Greg, what was that? And I said, well, that was wrestling. He said, but how are my guys going to follow it? I said, that's their problem. I did my job, got the people up off their feet. So that was the difference in the styles. So Hogan, I told my dad, God, the guy's big, he looks good, but man, he needs a lot of work. And he said, well, have him give me a call. And he never called. 3 months later, he called. And my dad called me. He said, well, this is Hogan. I said, well, bring him in, and we'll work with him. So we brought him in, and we put him in 6-man tag team matches with Jim and myself, so he could learn in the ring pacing and how to control the match. And we were in Chicago. We were wrestling Bockwinkel, Stevens, and Pat Patterson. And they had Bobby Heenan in the corner. Rosemont Horizon sold out. And we came out in the ring, and the people just exploded when we got in. And Hogan did his pose, and I told Jim, I said, hey, reach over and grab his t-shirt up here. And I grabbed the one side, and we tore it off him real slow. And that place just blew the roof off of it. So that's where he got that. But he needed people like the Nick Bockwinkel's, the Ray Stevens, from the babyface side, myself, Brunzell, working with them and teaching him in the ring and how to react and what to do. And he was a little awkward. He didn't know who he was yet. He was the Hulk, but he didn't know what the people really saw in the Hulk. So Vern is the one that told him, when you start coming back, boy, you show that fire and do that, boom, boom, boom. And, everybody taught him a little, but he wasn't ready then. But we had signed an agreement, Vern and I did. We couldn't, what do you call it?
Disclosure?
Yeah.
Non-disclosure?
Non-disclosure, thank you. With CBS. They had called us, and they wanted to put professional wrestling on the network starting in April. And this was end of September, first part of October when they came to us. So in October, we ran our battle royals through November, and then the winners were to meet the champion in the different cities. And Hogan won the battle royal, but didn't win the championship. And our last battle royal was in Phoenix, Arizona. And that night, Hogan was going to Japan, and him and Andre, and they got on the plane. Vince was on the plane. This is what we found out later. And signed him to a contract. So when he came back, was Christmas week. So we put Hogan in all these matches with tag team matches. And then in April is when we were supposed to go on that network. And that's when he would have wrestled Bockwinkel for the title. And then it may have changed. So we never got to that. And we had Christmas week, was a big week, and it was all sold out everywhere. from Minneapolis, Chicago, Winnipeg, Denver, Phoenix, Salt Lake City, San Francisco. And Hogan didn't show up for any of them. And this is Christmas weekend. I called him up and he was sitting at home. I said, hey, what are you doing? We got a match. It's sold out. Well, I signed a deal with McMahon. I said, well, Hulk, this is the way you do business. You know, you can fulfill these dates and then leave. I mean, we won't hold you, but you got to fulfill your commitment. I mean, that's the ironclad contract that wrestlers had with promoters. It was a handshake. And he didn't fulfill that. And he left right after that. And then other wrestlers started to leave. Vince McMahon hit us the hardest because we had the best talent.
Yes, you did. You did.
And it was phenomenal, you know. And you know, and when guys don't show up for the main event, you know, it kills your credibility. And that's how he destroyed us. He would grab our main event people every single time. My partner even left. We had a cage match in Winnipeg with the Road Warriors, sold out, and he didn't show up. And I said, Jim, Jesus, I mean, we've been friends since high school. And Vern trained you. Why would you let us down like that? You know, make the matches, then leave. Well, they told me they'd pay me more. Well, how do you know what you're going to get paid? So, and that was the same thing Hogan said, well, Vince is paying me more to stay home. I said, Hogan, I mean, that week, those days of Christmas, he'd have probably made between 20 and 30 grand.
Wow.
So, you know, that's how McMahon went after us. And then he just started on the other tour, but he hit us hardest because of our television network with ESPN and our TV ratings on the All-Star Wrestling. There was only one show that beat us. It was 60 Minutes. We had a 24 rating with a 64 share of the audience. 60 Minutes had a 24 rating, but they had 65% of the audience watching. And our whole network, that's how strong it was.
Wow.
That was every city that we were in.
Yes, of course, I'm glad that I got to know these people. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's a privilege to have had the opportunity to know them and know them in ways the fans did not. And, you know, just in personal ways. You know, Superstar Billy Graham was a very gifted artist, and he gave me a print of one of his paintings, which is, you know, now I valued at the time, but I really value now. And, you know, the Iron Sheik, I saw him interact with his family, and I saw what a fundamentally decent man he was behind all the bluster. And, you know, I got to know his family as well. And, you know, I was very touched that they asked me to speak at his funeral. And I have to say, it was a joy to spend time with them, even though it was under those circumstances.
Right. Yeah, no, I bet. You know, going to Superstar Billy Graham, when you think back to his reign as WWF champion, or WWF champion, I guess, right? I mean,
Yes.
he's old school, right? And so
Yes.
when you look back at his reign, I mean, very iconic and a great
And very odd for the time, because they did not look. WWF, people stayed champions for years. I mean, it's unthinkable now. Bruno won the title the first time in 71 and held on to it till in 63 and held on to it until 71. Then you had Pedro Morales, I believe he had something like a 3-year run. And then he lost to Stan Stasiak, who only kept the title a short period of time. And then it went back to Bruno. Superstar Billy Graham was champion for nearly a year. A villain who was a wrestling champion for nearly a year. And that was very rare because WWF fans were not accustomed to that. The other thing with Graham was he won the title in 1977. That same 1977 I spoke about, when Son of Sam was picking off couples in parked cars, when we had riots in New York, when punk rock was exploding in certain precincts of New York, and when disco was thriving in New York. And so Graham, with his flamboyance, with his rhythmic catchphrases, with his tie-dyed outfits, really fit into the texture of the city at that time. And Vince Sr. had made a decision that he was just keeping Graham there as a caretaker champion for Bob Backlund. Graham was getting cheered, and he wanted to turn babyface, and he wanted his reign extended. And Vince Sr. told him, look, a deal's a deal. You knew what the plan was going in. And Graham actually went through a emotional spiral in the aftermath of losing to Backlund. And, that's when people say it's not real. It was pretty real to him.
Right, right. And what is so ironic about this is we're talking about superstar Billy Graham, and we're talking about the Iron Sheik, and then you bring in Bob Backlund. Bob Backlund won the title from superstar Billy Graham and lost it to the Iron Sheik. How ironic.
It's like bookends around Bob Backlund.
And you know what? I heard an interview with Bob Backlund when he lost the title. He went through an emotional turmoil too.
He really did, yes. And I think in both cases they felt pushed aside, and each loss signified the end of a certain era. Now, ironically, now that you brought this up, superstar Billy Graham thought he brought color to the ring, and then it was going to Backlund, who he thought was more of a traditional athlete and not a sports entertainer per se.
Yeah.
Backlund, when he lost, thought he was a pure athlete, and now this era, we were going into the Hulkamania era, so now the color of superstar Billy Graham was coming back, but in the form of Hulkamania, and Hulk Hogan was inspired by superstar Billy Graham. So it was in ways we never saw before. But I think each man struggled with the notion that their time had passed.
Yeah.
Or so it seemed. I mean, Backlund had a great heel run in the 90s, which, to me, that's some of the most fun stuff he ever did.
Right, right.